It is fantastic for us to be back face to face. I'm just so excited about this. We last met face to face on, virtually in 2020, but face to face on the Dart, which Chris Purdy remembered amazingly, at Princetown. So that's 6 years ago since we've been together in a room as members. I'll come back to that later on. So what have we done in the last 6 years? I thought what I might do is just a synopsis of the last 6 years of WTT's activities. Our bread and butter stuff is advisory work and practical projects. And in those 6 years, we've done 1,100 odd advisory visits. We've done heading up towards 400 practical projects, and I'll explain what they are in a second. Worked on a couple of thousand kilometres of river and spoken variously to fishing clubs, local community groups, groups of students, a couple of hundred of those in that 6-year period. So it's been quite a busy time. The key to all of that work has been our partnership with the Environment Agency, and I can't speak highly enough for the value that we get out of the Environment Agency, in part from your rod licence money, but also the Rivers Trusts, the Wildlife Trusts, the angling clubs, which all of you represent in the room. Those partnerships are absolutely critical to all that we do. This I thought was quite an interesting slide, because what that previous slide, the one before, suggested is our work is very sort of muck and wellies. And if you were listening to the media, you might think there's only one show in town, and that's sewage pollution. So why aren't we doing sewage pollution like every other NGO and individual and? Well, this is why. If these data are to be believed, that's a big caveat, but these are government data, they suggest that the thing that is most knackering our rivers is agricultural pollution. So the agency think that out of 14,000 bits of river, where they have got a reasonable degree of confidence, 5,000 odd of those are failing under the Water Framework Directive because of agricultural pollution. But the next in the list, just shy of 4,000, is physical modification. And that's where WTT comes in. So that's things like rivers that have been moved, that have been straightened, that have been dredged, that have got weirs stuck in them. And that's where we've kept our focus. So I thought that was quite a telling slide. Why is WTT fiddling about doing practical stuff? There's the answer. Who done all this work? Well, this mob, by and large. So we now have 10 conservation officers. Since 2019, we met in May on Dartmoor. We acquired one of our Lofty brigade, Nick Lawrence, in August of that year. And most recently, last calendar year, we acquired David Oakley, who's the big beardy dude over here, and Ed Noyes, who's tucked over in the furthest corner of the room, who are our latest conservation officers. So this is the gang that we have. Their advisory work has spanned geographically from Cornwall, David was quite recently on the Foy, for example, to the headwaters of the Spey, where Gareth was a couple of months ago, from Lincolnshire, the Upper Witham, for example, in the east, and as far west as the very western tip of Donegal, and in fact a bit further west in Sligo. So a pretty big geographical coverage of Britain and Ireland, the UK and Ireland. The practical work they do. So the practical work spans from what was very much our bread and butter. So days in the river with groups of volunteers. This is Rob McGovern with a few volunteers on the Mimram in Hertfordshire. This is Rob McGovern on the Shep in Cambridgeshire. So this is kind of throwing stuff in. Woody material in the first shot, gravel in this shot. And this is David Oakley working with the Greywell fly fishers, Mike and Trevor, on the Whitewater, putting stuff in. a little bit scaled up in that it involves a machine. So rather than just wheelbarrows and shovels, as Rob was doing on the Shep, here's a bit of machinery coming into the fray. I've used this photograph quite a lot recently, including in EA talks. And there's one notable person in the photograph who's got no PPE, is standing within the swing of the bucket of the machine, and he just happens to be the Earl. Is that right? He's obviously transcends any of this PPE health and safety nonsense. Again, just slightly ramping up the kind of practical projects that my colleagues are out doing. This is Tim putting in what's called a pre-barrage on a drain in a beck, in Lincolnshire, called the Nocton Beck. So he's put in a whole lump of limestone here to try and raise the water levels through this culvert to aid fish passage. This is Nick Lawrence, my colleague Nick Lawrence, working with Action for the River Kennet, Rupert Kelton, who you'll meet later in the day, putting woody material, quite big woody material, into the Kennet downstream of where we are, some way downstream. I'll show you what this kind of stuff does in a little while. But, you know, it's pretty chunky stuff that he's lobbing into this bit of river. All the time we're scaling up a little bit. This is the Snaysholme Beck in North Yorkshire. It's a tributary of the Weir, headwater stream of the Weir. And this is some work that Johnny Gray has done. And again, it's just slightly ramping up the scale of stuff that the lads are doing. So Johnny has been putting in these entire trees, complete with their root balls here. And in this case, he's also stuck the river back in a previous channel, actually, around the side here. So he's really just kind of, if you like, messing up the landscape, but he's creating physical diversity based on the principle that ecological diversity will follow, for bugs, for fish, for plants. This is Rupert Kelton's drone shot of one of those trees that got lobbed in the Kennet. I love this little bit of video footage, okay? A week before this drone footage was taken, this tree, this pair of trees, were dropped in more or less to the margins, okay? What you'll see is how quickly that woody material has started to change the physical structure of the river. And again, with that change comes ecological change. It's carved out a great big pool here and thrown all of that gravel up into that. It's done all of that in a week. So you've created deep water habitat for certain plants, certain invertebrates, certain fish, and this lovely ramp of gravel, which for many of us in the room is trout spawning habitat, but it's great for dace, minnows, gudgeon, barbel, blah, 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 blah. Anything that spawns on gravel is going to be very happy with those couple of trees lobbed in the river. That's what woody material can do, even in a single week. I'm not sure how well this will show, but one of the things that some of the conservation officers do is they're big on fencing. This is the very headwaters of the River Scurfair in North Yorkshire, in the Dales. It's a wharf headwater stream, okay? The importance of the headwaters is they are very much the factory for the lower river. So invertebrate production, fish production is driven in these headwater streams. This is 4 months after Johnny and partners up there put in these fence lines and planted trees, okay? This is June. Bizarrely, that ash is not yet in leaf because this was a dry year. Roll forward to June of this year, we had a wet spring up there. That's the same shot. Now, I don't know how well you can see that, but in 3 and a bit years, all of the area around the river has heavily vegetated. The trees have really started to come through. There's that same ash, but in leaf. When Johnny electrofishes this, post-works, he found 5 times more trout fry than he did before the fences went up and the trees went in. So the principle is build it and they will come. It's not rocket science. And this is very topical, from a climate change point of view, if you're a cold water adapted animal, like an invertebrate or a trout or a bullhead, you will be very happy here. You won't be very happy here. Full radiation, full exposure to cook gently on a summer's day like this. You may have read about this. This is Tim Jacklin's project on the Ecclesbourne, which is in Derbyshire. It's a tributary of the Derbyshire Derwent. This is the famous Snake Lane Weir project. So, partly because of Tim's work, salmon have been returning to the Trent catchment. This is a Trent tributary. And when they swim up the Ecclesbourne, this is what they meet. So this wall of concrete, what they did meet, you know what's coming. To put it in context, that photograph is taken looking downstream. The first one was taken looking upstream at the face of the dam. But when Tim and his excellent EA partner Ryan Taylor dewatered the stream, that's what that wall of concrete looked like, okay? Now you could imagine, if you were a salmon, you're in trouble, but if you're a trout, you know, a 1 pound trout that's looking to migrate to spawn, or a chub, or a dace, you're knackered, you're not getting over that wall. So what Tim and Ryan did was they took it down, and there it is, gone. So that's exactly the same view looking downstream with the Weir gone. And this is what that section upstream looked like before the Weir went away, and that's the autumn of 23, Tim? Yeah. It was just before a very famous storm called Storm Babette, which reorganised the project really, really radically. But a month ago, on the 11th of June, that view looked like that. So instead of a massive impenetrable wall and an impounded dysfunctional bit of sludgy river upstream, you've suddenly got no weir, which would be here in the foreground were it there, and fish able to go all the way up. As proof of concept, if you like, Tim and Ryan completed that project, as I said, in the autumn of 2023. In January 2024, upstream of where the weir was, this corpse was found. She is a hen salmon, was a hen salmon. So let's romanticise the story and say that before she was eaten by an otter, she spawned in the gravels above where Snake Lane Weir was. And I think, Tim, subsequent electrofishing has found salmon up there, hasn't it? Juveniles. So it worked. Similar big-scale project, really. This is Scotton Weir on the Nid in North Yorkshire. It's 75 metres wide. It's 4 metres high. It fed this mill when it was a mill. It's now a redundant structure. So in, I think, 2022, our colleague Johnny Gray applied for a grant from a thing called the Open Rivers Programme. He won 73,000 euros, and he took this weir down for about 60 grand. You might be thinking, Christ, that's a lot of money. Actually, in our world, in the river restoration world, 60 grand is very, very much loose change. And so Scotton Weir went from that to this. So that is the view with Johnny's back to the mill. So it's looking the other way across the river. But you can see the triangular cross-section of where Scotton Weir was. So if you're a salmon, a trout, a barbel, a chub, you've now got free access. In this case, it opened up 24 kilometres of river that were previously pretty inaccessible to fish. I thought this was quite a nice, this is a time-lapse photograph of, when it gets going, of the River Gelt in Cumbria. And this is my colleague Gareth Pedley taking down what's a rather nasty looking structure. It's actually an EA structure, so it's there to measure water flow down the River Gelt. It's a kind of a two-stage platform, but you can imagine that if you're a fish trying to get up here to spawn, it's a pretty hostile jump. Well, it's a very hostile jump if you end up on that apron, and then on this one as well. So this is it going. He guaranteed 2 of these, and they cost in total 30 grand, which is not bad, all in. So I suppose I've coined this last chapter, what more to do, which I suppose by implication is what haven't we done? Well, we are going to do what we, I think, by and large do very well, which is the kind of muck and welly stuff, only we might do it a little bit bigger. And one example of that is that Tim, sitting here at the front, for his sins, won a DEFRA grant recently of £1.18 million, which is pretty much double any other project we've ever taken on. I say we, the royal we, because Tim's doing the work. We are, as hopefully this is a demonstration of, we're going to re-engage with WTT members. As you can see, the annual get-together returns. We had a Trout in the Town get-together 2 weeks ago, yeah? We'll do a programme of walks and talks, and we're going to make more noise. Salmo, there's e-newsletters that Sophie started doing. That's it. Thank you.